And welcome back to Casual Card Games, and I'm finally coming at you guys with my Wauki the Younger deck profile for Commander. Hopefully my phone cooperates. I just got a new phone. Hopefully the settings, I've been having issues as far as it like switching back and forth from like shooting vertical to horizontal. Anyway, let's hope this works out. All right, so my deck, I run all but basics. So basically I got 19 swamps, 19 mountains to cut it in half. For anyone that doesn't know with Wauki, it's a 3/3 reach lifelinker. If another source you control would deal non-combat damage to a permanent or player, it deals that much damage plus 1 to that permanent player instead. And whenever you cast instant or sorcery, Wauki deals 2 damage to any target. Okay, so this deck is basically Rakdos Spellslinger. So we're going to start with the thing that we play the most in the deck, which is sorceries. So I start with cheapest mana cost and then go to highest. So 1-drops, we got Crash Through. Creatures you control gain trample to end turn, you get the draw card. So obviously, any cantrip that's letting us draw a card after we cast it, we don't really care about the first part. We're just wanting the draw. So that. End the Festivities. Deals the damage to each opponent, each creature, and planeswalker they control. 1-drop, and then obviously because of Wauki, not only is it an instant or sorcery, but because of the damage it's doing, Wauki makes it do an additional damage. Night Haze. Target creature gains Swamp Walk until end turn, draw a card. I mean, that can be handy if you're trying to attack, but generally we don't really attack a whole lot in this deck. Overmaster. The next instant or sorcery spell you cast this turn can't be countered, draw a card for 1 red. That's pretty good. And by the way, I just got done playing like 9 games of Commander with my buddies, and this deck got used twice, once by me, and then my buddy thought it was so cool he wanted to use it, and he won as well. So both times it was played, it won. So I actually think this deck's working pretty well. Because basically what you need in this deck is you need, instants of sorceries that are basically, cantrips or cheap, whatever, that allow you to draw. You need draw power to refill your hand. And basically the burn damage kind of just takes care of itself. But basically draw and burn is all we're really doing. Renegade Tactics, target creature can't block this turn, draw a card. You get the idea. Vicious Rumors, deals the damage to each opponent, and then each opponent discards a card, then puts the top card of the library into the graveyard. You gain 1 life. Vicious Rumors, it's pretty good. Like I said, when you combine it with Wauki, that's 2 damage to everybody. They discard a card, mill a card, all that stuff. So the next package of cards, really, like these 2-drops, you can, whatever you fancy as far as creature removal, do it. But basically, I thought if I'm going to be doing Rakdos Spellslinger, and to even out like the colors in the deck of not having too much red and trying to balance out the black, I was like, why don't I just run a bunch of creature removal spells? Because I've always wanted to play them in something, but in Commander, single creature removal normally isn't the best. You'd rather have like, board removal, like, destroy all creatures, whatever, mass removal. But in this deck, it really does work out because we're trying to cast smaller CMC stuff to spell sling, whatever. Epic Downfall, you exile target creature card with converted mass 3 or greater. By the way, in the future, if you guys don't want me to read all the cards, I mean, I don't really have to. I just figured if someone stumbles upon this and they've never, seen these cards before or whatever, maybe my quick little description can help them out. Feed the Swarm, it's the only way we can possibly get rid of enchantments in this deck, and yes, you have to lose the CMC of whatever you get rid of, but this deals with enchantments or creatures for 2 mana. Flame Rip deals 4 damage to each player. Literally, it got used on me by my buddy, and he had damage doublers and stuff like that. Basically, he was able to do 21 damage to each of us with that card. Mire and Misery, each opponent sacrifices a creature or enchantment. It's only opponent, so we don't have to do that. Night's Whisper, in my opinion, this is my go-to draw card in any Commander deck. If I run black, I'm running Night's Whisper normally. You draw 2 cards, you lose 2 life. It's kind of like a Pot of Greed. Sign in Blood. So normally I don't run Sign in Blood because I run a lot of 3-color decks, but in a 2-color deck, the 2 black that you got to pay to basically do what Night's Whisper does, not too hard to get. So like that. Blightning deals 3 damage to target player. That player discards 2 cards. I like that. Browbeat. Any player may have Browbeat deal 5 damage to him or her. If no one does, target player draws 3 cards. That happened. My buddy used that against me, and basically he had got me to the point where I could not take any more damage, so he did get to draw 3 cards. He won like immediately right after that. Fiery Gambit, I still haven't got to use this, but I'm really looking forward to it. Flip a coin until you lose a flip or choose to stop flipping. If you lose a flip, Fiery Gambit has no effect. If you win 1 or more flips, it deals 3 damage to target creature. If you win 2 or more flips, it deals 6 damage to each opponent. If you win 3 or more flips, draw 9 cards and untap all lands you control. So basically, we'd never stop with just the first effect, because dealing 3 damage to target creature, that's not good enough. If you win 2 or more flips, you can deal 6 damage to each opponent. Now, if we got damage doublers or if that's enough to kill somebody, yeah, we might stop right there. But you're hoping to just go nuts and just be like, well, let's see what happens. And if you win 3 flips, you draw 9 cards and untap all lands you control. I mean, that's pretty good. Fiery Confluence. This put in some work earlier. Okay, so choose 3. You can choose the same mode more than once. So you can either deal damage to each creature, destroy target artifact, or the one that we're choosing 9 times out of 10, deal 2 damage to each creature. So because of the way Wauki stacks, if you choose that mode 3 times, each of those modes is going to get an additional 1 damage. So basically for 4 mana, you're doing 9 damage to each opponent, which is pretty good. Ruination. This is my red staple. Because I run nothing but basics, this card doesn't hurt me at all. Destroy all non-basic lands, so it's pretty easy. Plus with this deck, even if you're not like me and you only run basic lands, even in this deck, the people that would run dual lands, you really don't need dual lands. If you just run a decent amount of like basics, you're going to draw into them and you're going to get them, and you don't have to worry about this comes in tapped and whatever. But that's just me. It's just what I'm saying. Skullrend deals 2 damage to each opponent, which can get increased because of Wauki and other cards. And then also those players each discard 2 cards at random. I like the random discard. I like that a lot. And then lastly, for the sorceries, we got Dance with Calamity. This is basically Blackjack the card. So for 8 mana, you shuffle your library, and as many times as you choose, you may exile the top card of your library. So you basically just exile 1. If the total mana value of the cards exiled this way is 13 or less, you may cast any number of spells from among those without paying the mana cost. So basically, you're just trying to be under 13. So as long as you don't hit 13 or less, so as soon as you hit 13, you'd be done right there. But I would normally stop at around 10. The average CMC of this deck, I believe, is like 2 or less. So if I got around 10, I'd be like willing to stop. I'd be like, I'm cool with stopping. So... But if you think about it that way, let's say you flip over like 2 CMC stuff, you just got to cast 5 things for cards that weren't even in your hand. So I think that can be pretty good. You don't get the exile cards back. So if you exile lands off that, they're just gone. But anyway, all right, next we're going to go over the creatures. So I got Blood Scrivener. This is a card I'm really happy. This is like my own personal tech. I haven't really seen anybody else use this in a Wauki deck. But like I said, originally when I built this deck, I had like a ton of burn damage stuff that was really cool, but I just kept like running out of juice, and I was like, well, okay, I exhausted all the cards out of my hand. Blood Scrivener says it's a 2/1 zombie wizard for 2. It says if you would draw a card while you have no cards in hand, instead draw 2 cards and lose 1 life. So because of the amount of cantrips that we have, then we have some other effects that allow us to draw. And also, this also works just for your regular draw step. Like if you were out of cards, you'd get to draw 2 cards instead of 1. Yeah, we lose a life, but we got Wauki, who has lifelink, which this card actually gains us quite a bit of life anyway. So yeah, that one's good. Electrostatic Field, whenever you cast an instant sorcery, deal 1 damage to each opponent. That's good. Firebrand Archer, kind of the same thing, except it's not just specific to instant or sorcery, it's non-creature spell, but it's the same mana cost. Kessig Flame Breather is literally the same card as Firebrand Archer, except the stats are different and the types are different. Runaway Steamkin, one of the best red cards in the game, if you're talking about either a mono red deck or a 2-colored red deck. Now, if you're running 3 colors, I probably wouldn't run Runaway Steamkin because the chances of you always playing a red spell, not that great. But anyway, it's a 1/1 elemental for 2 mana. When you cast a red spell, if Runaway Steamkin has fewer than 3 counters on it, put a +1/+1 counter on it. You get to remove 3 +1/+1 counters, add 3 red mana. It's really great. If anyone's ever used Runaway Steamkin, I don't have to explain to you. You know how good that card is. Young Pyromancer, a.k.a. the Young Rap God. Whenever you cast an instant sorcery spell, create a 1/1 red elemental creature token. Some rapper someday that's a Magic fan needs to like try to get Young Pyromancer like on his CD and see if Magic doesn't or Wizards of the Coast doesn't sue them. Gutter Snipe. If you ain't Gutter Gang, I don't trust you. Whenever you cast an instant sorcery spell, deals 2 damage to each opponent. Once again, great in this deck. War Elemental, you don't really see this card used in Wauki decks, but I really think you should. It's a 1/1. When it comes into play, sacrifice it unless an opponent was dealt damage this turn. Not too hard in our deck to make sure someone's taking damage. Whenever damage is dealt to an opponent, put that many +1/+1 counters on War Elemental. This thing can become like a 20/20 in 1 turn. It's not hard. Torbrand. So my original version of a burn deck in Commander was mono red and Torbrand was my commander. But I really like this version more for the fact of just adding black as a secondary color and just having Spellslinger as like a theme. It's more focused, and that's what I like. Before it was just like, okay, yeah, I have burn cards, but I just kept like having to find some random jank stuff that I'm like, well, you know, that's a good red card. Okay, I'll throw that in there. So I like this better. Anyway, Torbrand, 2/4 Dwarf Noble. If a red source you control will deal damage to an opponent or permanent, an opponent controls, it deals that much damage plus 2 instead. So great in this deck. Charmbreaker Devils, because we are a Spellslinger deck and because we, whatever can get us advantage back from the graveyard, that'd be nice. It's a 4/4 Devil. At the beginning of your upkeep, return a random instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand, and then whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, it gets +4/+0 until end of turn. I mean, yes, this thing could get up to like a 16 power creature in one turn. I mean, that's not that hard. That being said, we're probably not going to do that, or if it does happen, it might happen the turn it's played. But mainly, this is just to get our instances sorceries back and gives us a little bit more card advantage. Harvester of Souls, because this works out perfectly, because we run a lot of black removal cards, this works out perfectly where we're killing a lot of stuff. Also, Wauki can kill stuff. We got some burn damage stuff that kills creatures. So it's a 5/5 demon with Death Touch. Whenever another non-token creature dies, you may draw a card. This includes your own creatures, but we don't play that many creatures that'll just be chilling on the board and dying. Karavek the Merciless, whenever an opponent casts a spell, it deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to any target. Karavek's great. Now, I know there's some people that would just rather run Karavek as their commander, and you're totally allowed to do that. Like I said, I like Wauki because I feel like it's more focused. And then lastly, for the creatures, we got 2 of them. They're brothers. We got Baleful Force, and we got Magmatic Force. So I like the Force cards. I know some people think it's way too much mana to spend, but dude, we're in Commander, okay? I don't really feel like this deck gets slowed down because of that. So Baleful Force, it's a 7/7. It says at the beginning of each upkeep, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. By the way, the Force, these creatures, they all do something at each upkeep, which is why in Commander I think they're great. So being able to draw a card on each upkeep, if you're playing with 4 players total, getting 4 draws, so the 3 extra because of Baleful Force on your opponent's upkeeps, and then obviously you got your own draw. But getting 4 draws a go around, that's great, and I like that. And yeah, you lose 3 life or whatever for your opponent's upkeeps, but you got Wauki who can kind of counteract that. And then we got Magmatic Force. At the beginning of each upkeep, it deals 3 damage to any target. If we got Wauki out, that's 4 damage to any target every upkeep. And if we got other cards out, that we're just going to do more damage. But yeah, I like it. You don't have to play those cards, but for me, I like them. They're fun. They're big CMC stuff, and I like that. And I think it's fun. And I told you guys this deck went 2-0 tonight, so I don't really feel like it's being slowed down by that. All right, let's get to the instance. Cremate. So exile target card from a graveyard, draw a card. Pretty good cantrip, I think. Dark Ritual. I've been dying to find a deck that Dark Ritual works perfectly in. I mean, you can technically run Dark Ritual in anything, but in this deck it works great. Add 3 black mana. That's good. Expedite. Target creature gains haste until end of turn, draw a card. Lightning Bolt. Deal 3 damage to any target. Cast Down. Like I said, stuff like this, Cast Down, Epic Downfall that I showed earlier, you can swap that whatever you feel comfortable with, but for me, I just found this and I threw it in there. Destroy target non-legendary creature. Doomblade, destroy target non-black creature. Go for the Throat, destroy target non-artifact creature. Heartless Act, which is one that no one talks about, but I think it's pretty good. Destroy target creature with no counters on it, or you can remove up to 3 counters from target creature. I guess I'd only ever do the secondary effect if my opponent had, creatures counters on a creature and they were about to win the game with those counters somehow. Then I'd be like, okay, I'll do that. But in general, I'm just going to blow up a creature with no counters on it. Infernal Grasp, destroy target creature, you lose 2 life. Price of Progress, this card doesn't affect us in the slightest, but it hurts our opponents. Deals damage to each player equal to twice the number of non-basic lands that player controls. For us, that will be 0. Smash to Smithereens, destroy target artifact. Smash to Smithereens deals 3 damage to that artifact's controller. Any way we can deal damage is great. Reckless Spite, so destroy 2 target non-black creatures, you lose 5 life. Being able to blow up 2 things for 3 mana, 2 creatures for 3 mana, I like that. Unlicensed Disintegration, destroy target creature. If you control an artifact, this deals 3 damage to that creature's controller, so a little bit of burn damage and creature removal, like that. And last instant is Breath of Malfagor. It deals 5 damage to each opponent. There's ways in this deck where you can do 8 damage to each opponent, 16 damage to each opponent, 21 damage to each opponent. The doubling effects are really awesome. Okay, let's get to the enchantments. Mechanized Warfare. 2 red and a generic. If a red or artifact source you control would deal damage to an opponent or permanent an opponent controls, it deals that much damage plus 1 instead. So that's a way to get additional damage. Pain Magnification. This is a Rakdos staple for me. Any deck that runs red-black, I run Pain Magnification in Commander, but it's in this deck it works great. Whenever an opponent's dealt 3 or more damage by a single source, that player discards a card. Now this does work in the sense of if I do something that's doing 2 damage to someone directly, and Torwalki bumps it up by 1, or vice versa. If Torwaki's doing 2 damage to someone directly, but I got Mechanized Warfare that increases it by 1, that becomes 3 damage by a single source. So that's all good. Phyrexian Arena, I was dogging on this card like a couple months back. I was saying that in general, I think Treacherous Blessing is better. In this deck, because we are Spellslinger, Treacherous Blessing would drain us pretty quickly, us having to pay a life every time we want to cast a card. Phyrexian Arena, at the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card, you lose 1 life. I think if you run, the more colors you run, the less significant Phyrexian Arena becomes because you can just play better stuff. But in a deck combo, like in a color combo like red-black, where your draw options are kind of limited, Phyrexian Arena giving you an additional draw every turn, yeah, that's good. Underworld Dreams, whenever an opponent draws a card, this deals 1 damage to that player. Obviously, with Torwalki, that would be 2 damage per draw, and then, like I said, we have ways to increase that. Greed. Greed is maybe the MVP of the deck in the sense of you need draw power in this deck, and the fact that this is just pay a black, pay 2 life, draw a card, and like I said, we are gaining life in this deck anyway, so the life isn't really that big of a deal. And being able to just, oh crap, okay, I ran out of cards, or I need something to do with my mana. All right, cool, pay a black, pay 2 life, draw a card. I love it. Mana Barbs. Whenever a player taps a land for mana, Mana Barbs deals 1 damage to that player. Yes, this is going to hurt us, but I guarantee you it'll hurt our opponents more. Fiery Emancipation. This might be the greatest card in the deck. Who knows? If a source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals triple that damage to that permanent or player instead. So, the only card that I can think of, I mean, Mana Barbs would hurt us because that is a source and it would be dealing damage to us. So Mana Barbs would hurt us and do triple the damage. The only other card in here that I saw with that earlier that my buddy was playing, he played Flame Rift with Fire Emancipation. Now, he was able to survive and win the game, but the Flame Rift did do triple the damage to him as well. But anyway, Fire Emancipation, I know it's like expensive. It's like, I think it's up to like $20, but for this deck, I feel like if you're already going to go out of your way to make this deck, I feel like might as well complete it with that. Sunbirds of Vacation, red staple for me, but even if you take out the fact that I run it in everything, just in this deck, it's great because whenever you're casting a lot of stuff, so Sunbirds, plus we have a lot of low CMC stuff, so the chance of us hitting something is great. For anyone that doesn't know what it does, when you cast a spell from your hand, you reveal the top X cards of your library, where X is that spell's converted mana cost. Cast one of the cards revealed this way without paying its mana cost as long as its mana cost is X or less. Put the rest of the cards in your bottom library in a random order. And the last enchantment is Wound Reflection. At the beginning of each end step, each opponent loses life equal to the life they lost this turn. That can be really bad for opponents. All right, we finish up the deck profile with artifacts. We run 5. Jet Medallion, because it's one of my decks, so I got to run the medallions. Reduces our black spells by 1. Ruby Medallion reduces our red spells by 1. Let's get those out of the way. Alhammarret's Archive, great card that once again I feel like nobody in this kind of deck build, I don't see this in like the EDH rec page, but I think you should. So for 5 mana, if you would gain life, you gain twice that much life instead. Now we don't run a whole lot of life gain, it's literally just Torwalki, but because Torwaki's our commander, being able to get, double the life gain, that's great off that just alone. But if you would draw a card except the first one you draw on each of your draw steps, draw 2 cards instead. Can't tell you how great that is in this deck with the amount of cantrips that we have. Being able to draw 2 cards instead of just 1, great. Seal the Guild Pact. For any deck that's running just 2 colors, I highly recommend this card. For 5 mana, when it enters the battlefield, you choose 2 colors. Obviously, in this deck, we choose red and black, Rakdos. Each spell you cast costs 1 less to cast for each of the chosen colors it is. So if we play Seal the Guild Pact first, which is what happened when I played earlier tonight, I could have played Torwalki, but I waited. I played Seal first, and that meant on my next turn I was able to play Torwalki, and then I had a follow-up play on the same turn, so I wasn't just play the commander and that's it. So I like that card. And lastly, we got a Bolas' Citadel. Now look, I know it's not original to put Bolas' Citadel in a deck, because it's great in every deck, but in this deck especially it's great. So for the 6 mana to the 3 hard black, that's not hard to get in this deck, obviously. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may play the top card of your library. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its mana cost rather than actually paying the mana cost of the card. So with Torwalki, because we have the lifelink, if we cast an instant sorcery, we'll be gaining life with Torwalki because the damage it's dealing, which kind of counteracts the Bolas' Citadel, us having to pay the life. We can tap it, sack 10 non-land permanents, each opponent loses 10 life. That's probably not going to happen because we don't have a whole lot of permanents chilling on the board that aren't lands. And the cool thing with Bolas' Citadel, if you haven't played a land yet and you hit, like your top card is a land, you can play it and then keep going with Bolas' Citadel. But anyway, that is the deck profile. Hopefully this turns out well, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Like I said, my buddy loved this deck, and he was like, I can't wait to play this deck. It's so much fun. So he had a blast with it. I have a blast with it. I'm so happy this deck turned out as well as it did. This is Chris with Casual Card Games signing out.